This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
Welcome back to Home Stretch here on Inside the Paint. Ira, let's get right to it. Is tonight's game against the Celtics in Boston, where you are the biggest game of the Miami Heat season?
To this stage, I would say yes. I mean, obviously, there could be other playoff seeding games the last week of the season that determine whether they're 1 or whether they're 4. But I think you lose today and Sacramento on Monday gets forgotten. Instead, we're talking about the Miami Heat have lost 5 of their last 6 games. They're going into a back-to-back in Chicago and Toronto. So I think tonight's the night you need to validate Monday. The fact that the Celtics don't have Robert Williams, who's sort of been the key to the turnaround of their season defensively, I think is a factor also. And it also is a measuring stick of where you are against the elite in the East. This is your last game of the season against the other top 3 teams in the East. In some order, Miami, Milwaukee, Philadelphia, Boston will be top 4. So this is the last measuring stick until you get to the first round and maybe even the second round of the playoffs against an elite level NBA team. Yes, it's a road game. You had last night's night off. It shouldn't be a problem. Yeah, I don't want to say it's huge because I'm not so sure seeding wise that finishing 2, 3, or 4 is any worse. It might be even better than finishing number 1. But I think you need to regain your footing. As a matter of fact, if you win this game and you go into Chicago and you win on Saturday, it doesn't really matter as much Toronto or going forward. One other factor here, Clay, that we've been downplaying to this point, the Heat are tied season series 2-2 with Philadelphia, 2-2 with Milwaukee. So
they got the Eastern Conference tiebreaker.
The Heat's conference record will carry them. That conference record leads now to 1 game because we didn't see them losing to the Knicks last week because they had conference loss last week also to Philadelphia. So all of a sudden, these Eastern Conference games, and they close with nothing now but Eastern Conference games. You have the Celtics tonight. You have Chicago on Saturday. You have Toronto Monday. Next week at home, you have Charlotte, Atlanta. You finish in Orlando. These conference games almost count double because of the tiebreakers, because of the possibilities of how it winds up. This is, I think, it's going to be seeding going to the final weekend. I would not be surprised, Clay, if you could finish 1st or 4th, even going into the final 2 days of the season on April 9th and April 10th. For all of those reasons, conference, regaining your footing, playing, showing what you can do against Boston. Yeah, this is more than 1 of 82. And I think if the Heat don't have an edge tonight to them, then they're not going to have it any other game the rest of the regular season. And that will be our signal. They've taken the foot off the gas pedal, that they just, I don't want to say don't care, that's too harsh for pros, but that they just believe there is something more important down the road. I think the Heat's intensity factor, almost as much as the final score, will be meaningful tonight here in Boston.
Yeah, and it's such a dangerous game with the foot on the gas pedal, off the gas pedal, and that because I don't know that this team has a switch that they can flip. Right? I think they felt last year like they did, and I know coaches hate this when you compare one year's team to the previous year's team because it's a much different group of guys, and you've added Kyle Lowry and PJ Tucker and players who clearly have that playoff experience and have been on teams that have taken it to another level. But last year, all we heard all year was that we can do this, we can flip a switch, we could do that. And then they go against Milwaukee, and Jimmy Butler shoots 29%, and they get blown out of the gym. So I need to see with this team that in a game that could potentially determine seeding once again, much like last year's game against the Atlanta Hawks, you need to step up. You need to show me that during the regular season, you do have a switch that you can flip for a game that matters, that is possibly the most important game of the regular season. Now, with that said, you went into Boston last year, and I'm doing the last year, this year thing again.
You're right.
And you won a similar game like that. You went into Boston, you won, and Jimmy Butler got hurt in that game, but you did win. You did find a way to come out with a victory. This is a different Boston team that, despite the Rob Williams injury, is ascending. And they seem to be finding, especially with the addition, of Derek White, they seem to be finding a new ceiling. So you need to prove against a team that a lot of people are starting to point to as the biggest challenger to the Brooklyn Nets in the East. People seem to be magically forgetting about Milwaukee. One of the biggest challengers to the Brooklyn Nets in the Eastern Conference. You need to prove that you can go toe-to-toe with them in their gym when they've been playing at a high level. And I need to see them win this game tonight. Because to your point, Monday night, if you lose tonight, then the shakeup that you had Monday night, that seems to have re-energized. It was just a one-off win against a, don't call it tanking, but tanking Sacramento Kings team that was missing arguably their two best players. And now you go on there and you play a team that's at the caliber of the games that you're going to want to win, and you can't get it done. I need to see this, Ira, tonight. I don't want to be the media guy who's making too much out of a regular season game, but to me, this is important. This is bigger. I need to see, and even if the final score, even if you lose by one or whatever, nobody wants to hear this. I need to see this team go in there and fight. I need to see this team go in there and show like it means something.
You know, it's interesting. You referenced last year, and I was thinking about that coming back here to Boston, is the Heat played Boston the end of the season. If they didn't win, they would have fallen to the play-in. People forget that. It was an absolute desperation. Seeding mattered. And I don't know if you have a cry-on for this or not. But the question this year is, does seeding matter as much? We know the Heat are going to be top 4 in some order. Might you be better off picking your poison and picking the preferred matchup to get to that grueling second round versus winding up with a Brooklyn with Kyrie and with KD? So it gets interesting. So I said this when we were sort of preparing for the game the other day. Thank you. Perfect cry-on switch there. Is, you know, I was saying this coming into the game, as it says in our lower third here, does seeding matter as much? Clay, I'm not so sure. I wouldn't rather be in the 4 seed and play Chicago in the first round than be in the 1, 2, or maybe 3 and wind up with Brooklyn. So I think it could get a little interesting at the end. Last year, there's no question, you don't want to be in the play-in. You lose 1 game or 2 games and your season's over. It's a really, really rough path to sort of have to chart. Even the Nets are going to find that out this time around. But you wind up as 1 or 2, and you have a really good shot of winding up against the Nets. It looks like 2 will be the bad spot when you'll face Brooklyn. Clay, that game on Saturday was eye-opening. And Brooklyn did that to you on your floor. And now they have Kyrie back on their floor. And I know they struggled their game after against Charlotte. And I know they struggled last night against Detroit. But the one thing about playing Brooklyn is this. They will score. And they will score a lot. And you can talk about your defense all you want, but can this Heat team score enough points to compete with the Brooklyn Nets? And I don't know if they can. And that goes back to the start of the show today, when you talk about combinations and generating the right looks and all that. I don't know if the Heat in the playoffs can be a 120-point team. And I think that's the team you need to beat Brooklyn. So yeah, seeding matters, but a top seed might not matter as much.
Can I tell you the thing about that game, and it goes back to what we were talking about earlier in the I wasn't surprised that Brooklyn was scoring. I was surprised that they were out rebounding Miami, especially offensively, that they were out rebounding them on the offensive end of the floor. Look, they're going to score, but man, you got to be ready to go get the ball when they don't. And so anyway, not to go back to what we were talking about earlier in the show, but it was a new layer of problems that you might have if you take on Brooklyn. And
well, and this also goes back to what we spoke about in our second segment when people listen to the podcast later today, and it's this, the rebounding you mentioned. So let's compare the Heat and Nets for a second. I think these answers are clear cut, and Clay, if you disagree, I'm going to come through the screen and grab you. Who's the better player, Kevin Durant or Jimmy Butler?
KD.
Who's the better player, Kyrie Irving or Kyle Lowry?
Kyrie.
Okay. So Bam Adebayo damn well better be the better player than Andre Drummond. Clay Ferraro on Saturday night, FTX Arena, who was the better player between the two of them?
Yeah, it was Drummond.
If Andre Drummond is going to be the better player in that matchup, you are totally freaking screwed. So that's what makes the matchup so challenging is Kevin Durant's going to outscore Jimmy. That's how Kevin Durant plays. Kyrie Irving could turn it on more than Kyle Lowry. That might just be an age factor, but that's another factor in play. Bam needs to be great. And Bam needs to be aggressive. And Bam needs to be the monster on the boards. Because if Andre Drummond's going to be running the fast break and flashing the Tyreek sort of, sign on the layup there, yeah.
That you got to remember that. I mean, that's something you got to store that in the memory bank.
Oh, Eric Spoelstra's showing that pregame video anytime you face Brooklyn, but that's my concern there. So when you and I were talking about most important Heat player and Heat leader and all of that, Bam has a real stake in these playoffs also. You can tell me all season why you should be DPOY. I should be DPOY. Yeah. Well, screw the postseason awards. Be DPOY of the playoffs and be the max extension player of the playoffs. Everything to now doesn't count. You make your name in the NBA playoffs. In the 2020 playoffs, let's be honest, when we came to making names, Bam had a moment. His moment on his block shot against Jason Tatum might have been the most iconic moment of those playoffs. But it was Jimmy Butler and it was Tyler HIRA who honestly carried the Heat to within 2 games of the championship against the Lakers. I think Bam's time is now if he is that player. And the thing is, if Bam is going to self-promote himself, and God bless his confidence, you have to show it on the court also. And the best time to show it on the court is in the playoffs.
And I do want to kind of go back to what we saw over the last week and add this footnote because we haven't mentioned it yet. Tyler HIRA didn't play in a couple of those games, right? And I mean, he's still kind of working through the knee issue. And it's one of those situations where I think you would agree with this. If each one of these were a playoff game, he would find a way to get out there and play. But you're trying to manage it a bit whenever you can. I think this last week did kind of showcase the importance of what he brings to the table. So it's not like you can look at all these games and say, oh, these are pointing out the fatal flaws with this team because there were kind of, you're sliding guys in and out. And yet at the same time, you got to bring that level of intensity. And that brings it back to what we're talking about with tonight's game. And actually for the next week, you mentioned the exam week sort of thing. And you go back to the exam week we had a few weeks ago where they found a way to do a lot better than I think we both thought they were going to do. And, the losing down the stretch against Milwaukee, it's like, okay, the same old, hey, what do they do late in games thing was an issue. But you found a way to win big games against good teams. Show it to me again. And you have to right now. And maybe this team is one of those teams that they need to have their backs up against the wall. Because last time, when they had their backs up against the wall, they responded. Last week, when it was one of those, let's exhale a little bit. You got the Knicks coming to town, the Warriors without Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, Draymond Green. They did not respond. I need to see what they do tonight. And think about tonight's game too, Ira. And look, it's just the nature of this thing. It's not to be cruel, but when the other team is missing a key piece of their squad with Rob Williams out tonight, and you have a coaching staff which is as good as the Miami Heat coaching staff is, you need to figure out where you can attack. And we know Rob Williams is fantastic at guarding the rim protection.
He's their Bam, sure.
So I want to see how the Heat counter that. Yes. And I want to see them, Ira, with 48 hours in between that Sacramento game and tonight's game against the Boston Celtics. I want to see them game plan. I want to see them go out there tonight and treat this like a playoff. Yes, exactly.
Yes, and that's the thing. And be in attack mode. And then we'll see tonight also, with the knee soreness, can Tyler HIRA attack? With his ankle issue, can Jimmy Butler attack? With his calf issue, can Caleb Martin attack? Because as good or as great as Tatum and Brown are, you can get yours on the other end. So it's not quite Kyrie and KD, but it's a similar situation. Can you go back and get yours on the other end? Can you get them in foul trouble? Jimmy creates foul trouble. Tyler HIRA, now that he's muscled up, has created more foul trouble. Can you do that? Can you take the game to them? Yes, we've seen the Heat before. They'll start with a 3-a-thon and you think all is perfect. That might not necessarily achieve the goal that you want. Can you play with force, Bam Adebayo again, and get to that point? I think that's what's going to be important tonight. And again, Clay, they freaking effed up last week because if they would have won those games, they would have had a cushion on top of the East, and Eric Spoelstra could have had player X, Y, and Z, and you and I and Big O, when I do his show on Friday, would have said, hey, they won the conference. What else they need to do? They can rest players. But they absolutely freaking screwed up last week, and now all of a sudden, every one of these remaining 6 games, except for the Orlando last game of the season, is playing a team with equal desperation. Tonight, Boston, the fight for the top seed in the East. Saturday, Chicago. They're teetering right there with the play-in with Cleveland. They need to win. Toronto, same scenario on Sunday. Come home, Charlotte. They don't want to have to play 2 play-in games. They want to get to that 7-8 seed, win and be done. Atlanta, they want to at least get home court in the 9-10 game. So all of a sudden, there's going to be no more of these. The other team is playing to lose. That ship has sailed with Sacramento. That ship has sailed with the Knicks. Now you have games that all matter. Going to be really interesting. How does Eric Spoelstra balance that? How does he balance the Saturday, Sunday back-to-back, Chicago and Toronto? And the shame of it all, Clay Ferraro, is this. If they would have won the games they could have and should have won, we never would be speaking about this situation on exam week 2.
And we close with this, Ira. We've said all this. We spent 58 minutes talking about this. Maybe this is what this team needs. And it's something where the identity of this team, you have a bunch of guys and they talk about it all the time. We're a group of guys who've been doubted our whole lives. We're better when our back is up against the wall. We weren't the first pick when we were playing with our buddies and you were picking teams and all that. It's a group of guys that tends to thrive when
Chip
they're
on the
doubted.
shoulder.
Chip on the shoulder.
Yeah.
And that's been gone. That was gone after you got to the 1 seed. For whatever reason, it left. Maybe it's back now, but I got to see it. And if you can close out this season, this is where this can be a good thing. If you close out this season, and Ira, maybe I'm different than you. I want to see them get the 1. I want to see them fight their way back to that 1 seed for 2 reasons. Number 1, I don't think Brooklyn's losing the first play-in game. I think they're going to get that 7 seed. But number 2, I need to see that this team can fight for something and get it, because they fought their whole lives. They said this is what we're built on. Show it now. Show it tonight against Boston. Show it against Chicago. Show it in the games that matter, that are playoff caliber games heading into the actual playoffs. Show me. Don't just tell me. Show me.
And next Monday on the Slomin's Home Security Inside the Paint Show, I want to see you with your big foam number 1 foam. We're number 1 finger. So we will see how it plays out. I will talk to you again next Wednesday.
Great stuff, guys. And thanks for your questions, your comments. Please make sure to smash the like button. Big O Show rolls on next. Thanks again.
This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.